actually read that part, so I'm not really up to speed on exactly how the pricing model works. It's a little more complex than some of the other services. Basically, the expectation is that most of what people store, they'll probably never ever want to get it back. I mean, we're certainly going to have it. We're going to have it forever. But the idea is that we don't want people just reading things back all the time, and the pricing model is designed to accommodate that.
Is the retrieval model random access, or is it a single container you get all of back?
What you retrieve is a single item called an archive. And one archive can be up to 40 terabytes of data at a time. So for example, I have a gigantic data tree at home of all of my family's digital cameras. And going back to like 15 years worth of digital cameras, I have one top level directory for every camera. And then inside that, I have a second level directory for this named with a year and a month. So what I did is I created a tar file for every one of those year-month pairs, and I'm in the process of uploading each of those to Glacier as an individual archive file.
This is in case your house burns down, you've got a copy of 2005.
I'm not worried about the house as much as disk drives failing and things like that. Yeah. But yeah, have all those things uploaded.
So for you, it's like a directory would be an archive, so they're not going to reach the 40 terabytes. It's going to be kind of...
I hope not. Given that my kids keep buying bigger and bigger digital cameras, at some point we're going to hit that 40 terabytes. But it's funny, every time we get a new digital camera in the house, the amount of stuff that comes off the camera in the first year eclipses all the other storage that we've had to date from all the other cameras. It's kind of scary, actually. Especially when my wife's sister told her to keep everything in raw files. And it's like, oh, jeez. Yeah, I corrected that really, really quick. And I said, look, every time you upload to the camera, it's going to cost me $2 a month of storage. And so you realize there's actually a price to this, but yeah, this is I think a pretty impressive level of pricing for archive storage. So in contrast to Iron Mountain, you don't have to worry about tapes and having tapes that might fall off the truck that might get stolen.
That's an interesting use case, using it for backup. I've been thinking about that myself. Now, are you using then the import-export service to get the data in there?
You certainly can. I'm just uploading it, just because I don't have time to do all that stuff with devices and tapes and stuff like that.
So you're just doing it gradually, because I was thinking of the problem of moving multiple terabytes.
I just do it.
Only meaningful way.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Is how to slice it up and
upload limit is in fact to send it physically.
My plan is basically do one camera per month, and I've gotten 2 taken care of so far, so I got 5 more to go.
Can we go to the Amazon offices nearby and just plug in somewhere?
What was it that Steve was saying though about exploding devices?
So ours never explode.
Yeah.
Trust
How many
us.
decades in advance today can you buy that storage? Can you only buy a month or a year?
Oh, you want a prepaid model?
Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't I be able to buy 40 years worth, right? And know it's taken care of, and never have to think about it.
I've been trying to convince our folks that this is a good business model, and they actually I've not been able to be that persuasive yet, but I think you and I both want the same thing of like, hand X dollars to Amazon and just say, keep this for me in perpetuity, right? Because at some price and some level of return on that money, it's always going to throw off enough interest to actually keep that data stored. I would actually love to have a model like that, but we don't have that.
And what it does is it eliminates you ever having to worry about it again. For the rest of your life, this is a solved problem.
It's like the astronaut and the credit card. Remember that story?
No.
Where the astronaut, the last speaker, he was up on the space station for 6 months.
Yeah.
And while he was gone, his credit card, he got a new credit card. He wasn't there to authorize it, so all those bills, lose all.
Yeah, she's like, bouncing payments because his credit card.
I think that there's a whole class of interesting problems to be solved there. Of the fact that you create these accounts, and not only do you want to keep them forever, but you always want to train one of your kids to be like the next generation of IT in your family, right? You actually need to pass these things on generation to generation.
Well, the model there is a trust, and so you want your kid to be a trustee of the family's trust of photographs. And,
yeah. Yeah, because even though I don't have time to go through the 100,000 pictures, surely one of my descendants will, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I can save 10 cents. Though they might, and the reason is that you've done a really clever thing, right? Which is, if they want to go way, way back a century to 2009, they can do that one operation, and they don't have to do a lot of hunting. Right?
That's true.
So with the right indexing scheme, it can be very rational to do it that way.
Yeah, I'm just assuming that tar files and JPEGs will still be worthwhile 100 years from now. But that's a different problem.
They'll also have image search, so you'll be able to say, look for this person.
Yeah, very, very true.
Are you going to talk about elastic MapReduce?
No, I didn't actually put anything at all in there, only because that was older than a year.
Oh, okay.
The last service I have documented here is called Simple Workflow. So this is a workflow management system as a service, all cloud-based, that's used to automate either a business or a system process. So when people hear workflow, they immediately think of some really boring business thing. And the fact is we actually use Simple Workflow in a number of our own services. So when you, for example, when you create an RDS database instance, there's a workflow that's activated. That means go get an instance, allocate it, install an operating system, patch the OS, install the database, patch the database, allocate storage, format the storage, apply security settings, apply all the other controls. That's a workflow that can actually be implemented by the Simple Workflow service. You have to build, you design your workflow, you build things called workers, you build something called the decider, that's actually the logic of what to do next in your workflow given the state that it's in, identify a set of activities. And you can build your workflow applications in any language.
Is this your own technology again?
Yes, again, this was something that we built for ourselves.
Yeah.
And
I notice Amazon has a habit of not leveraging much open source technology. Is it intentional or?
No, we use a fair bit. We don't always advertise it widely that we do, but because these things are as a service, what we want to give people is this is the final outside polished view. And people sometimes will guess, oh, there must be such and such inside this, or that must be something else. Quite often we will start with one implementation of something, and then over time we might move to something else, so we don't generally advertise a lot about what is built inside. This one I do happen to know we built from scratch internally.
So you went with Google though, is it intentionally over Amazon for a particular technical reason?
So when I decided, I mean, it was back before they decided it was worth doing load balancers, so I would have had to contract with an outside third party to provide the load balancing service. It was, I would have had to manage the databases myself and update them and patch them and the operating systems.
If you were to make the decision today though?
Well, I mean, based on the calculation from earlier, I'm probably paying about 1/10 what I would pay, and I would have to, I still, it's I want to write my application and not worry about the provisioning of the data store or provisioning of the cache or backups and redundancy. I just write it and I write the logic and it works. You know, I have to worry about scalability, I have to worry about, you know, multiples in what I'm doing in terms of how it's fanning out and when it fans back in and hotspots and stuff. So I do have to build it scalably, but I don't need to worry about a whole lot of the infrastructure that with Amazon I still would need to worry about.
So you actually want something that's more just pre-scaled, not pre-scaled, but has all the scalability architecture designed in for you?
Yeah.
So have you looked at our Elastic Beanstalk product at all?
Yep.
For that? Okay.
Elastic Beanstalk.
Elastic Beanstalk, yes, there's too many different things to talk about. Let me talk to you a little bit about Elastic Beanstalk then.
Well, everything is either simple or elastic if you're dealing with Amazon.
Hmm?
Everything is either
I
simple
know.
or elastic, right?
I know.
But you have to give it rigid limits ahead of time, right?
It's elastic within this.
Exactly.
So there's always
the box get bigger, you just stretch it out.
There are two sides to Elastic, right? Because if you are
Elasticity
does have a cost.
is rigidity, right?
Elastic does have a cost, right? And we can't do things for free or that are not economical. So if something needs to get bigger and use more of our resources, then we have to have a way to actually make sure that we're very, very conscious of the fact that
as a company who's, you know, my profit is not tied to the amount that a product is used. You know, it is vaguely tied to it, but not exactly. You know, and they can control how many events they send based on using the app. And I'm basically charging them by users, not by number of events.
Okay.
You know, charging by number of events would be the most logical thing, and I could put a cap on it and say up to 50,000 a month.
So your business model
isn't,
you don't realize direct revenue based on like the number of like database requests you make or things like that.
And I could, but they don't know, and I don't expect them to know. I expect them to be really wrong about that number. And instead of passing that on and kind of making it their responsibility, we're going to take it in the end.
You want to be, Jeremy, very careful about what you said because it's anti-historical. I mean, virtual memory was invented in the 60s, and the non-computer scientific explanation for what it is, right, is it makes you not have to worry anymore about how much memory you have, right?
Yeah.
And so everything, virtually everything, except very unusual corner cases embedded in other things, have gone in the direction of virtualizing. And in fact, in the last decade, you see everything in sight is being virtualized, right? And the underlying economic principle that drives it is I don't want to have to worry about it. I don't want to have to provision. And can you squeeze out an extra 5%? Yes. But it's the reason that Herb Simon got the Nobel for economics, right? It's satisficing. It's true that I can squeeze an extra 5% out if I put in the effort, but it's more economical for me to not have to put in the effort, right? And it's better to have the general solution and even pay a little extra but have the general solution.
Sure.
If you have to constantly be thinking about provisioning, the cost of that is too high for someone who's trying to.
My guess is it's more like 75%.
Yeah.
So we haven't even talked about other parts, like our auto scaling or load balancing, where you can basically very easily set up an array of instances and say, based on these metrics it exports, I want to either add more or take some away. And that's actually things that we built in the time between presentation 1 and presentation 2 that I didn't have time to talk about. Like we had to go into a lot more detail to actually review 4 years worth of progress than we could do. But we do have an automatic scaling system that's very, very easy to set up and to use. But anyway, let's end on Elastic Beanstalk here. So the idea with Beanstalk is we've talked a lot about the different parts, and sometimes you care about the parts, sometimes you don't. With Beanstalk, what you can do, we can create a new application, and I'm just going to call it JB2 to be really descriptive here, my app. And so this is a platform as a service or a container model. We currently support 4 different environments: Linux and PHP, Windows and IIS and .NET, Tomcat and Java, or Linux and Python and what's called WSGI. So with any of these, you simply create your application. Inside the app, you can create multiple environments, each of which can be running in parallel. So you might have a test environment and a production environment. And when you set one of these up, and I do have one that's already running. Do I have one that's running? No, I don't have one that's running. So we'll just use a sample app right here for now. And we're going to call it environment 1. See if that's available. Oh, somebody already has that. Ah, got that one. Okay. So by setting this up, we're going to launch it on a particular instance type. I'll leave these things all alone for now. So this is automatically going to create a EC2 environment. So it's going to create the instance, it's going to create the load balancer, it's going to create the autoscaler, it's going to create the autoscaler rules, it's going to create the monitoring, it's going to set things up so that as we get more traffic, it's going to actually scale as needed. We'll let this one boot up, which takes a couple minutes to do it. And it's going to actually throw off some events as it gets itself running. So you can see that it's already throwing off events. It should create the environment. It's going to put all of its logs in an S3 bucket.
This is a write scale like Elastic solution then?
No, write scale is great when you're managing tens or hundreds of thousands of instances. This is more of what they call platform as a service, where you basically are saying, here's my code, please make sure that it's running in a sufficiently scaled environment to handle all the requests coming in for it. Okay, so we created the load balancer, creating auto scaling, waiting for the instance to launch. And so this is going to take care of all those details that you're talking about. So this is functionally a lot closer to what a Google App Engine would provide for you. However, the cool thing here is you can have multiple environments running for a given application. And if you're doing, let's say, PHP, you can actually use Git to push code up to Beanstalk. But once you decide that you don't have enough control here, you can click, oh, we gotta wait for this to boot up fully. But once it's up and running, I'll show you with the edit configuration. You can go in underneath basically you can open up the hood a bit and you can say, well, I want to change auto scaling parameters. I want to change the way the load balancer works. I want to change the way that the health checks are run on my application. So you can gradually go from this fully automated environment to something where you can exercise more and more control over time. So this is, I think, a little bit closer in functionality to what you're talking about that you get with Google App Engine.
Yeah, throw this. So I didn't understand from your response to Mike whether you were saying could you handle hundreds to thousands of instances?
Right. Certainly, yeah.
Yeah, I assume so, but
we have
I wasn't sure if you were
customers that are running applications that span hundreds into thousands of instances at a time. We have special purpose customers that launch. Let's see, the biggest job I know that I can talk about is 50,000 cores at a time. That's basically like a bioinformatics kind of a job. Mm-hmm. It's all done on the spot market, so they're actually launching and consuming otherwise idle resources.
Question on the spot market. Who's selling on the spot market? Is it Amazon?
We are selling on the spot market.
So you're selling potentially reserved capacity that people aren't using?
It's reserved capacity, and it's capacity that we have put online that isn't just being used for anything else yet. So you can think of the spot market as the difference between the high water mark of what we own and what people are actually using.
Yep.
Right, so at any given time, we're rolling in N racks of hardware per day into our data center. So it's kind of going up at some rate. And we're always trying to be a little bit ahead of the curve. And so the difference between what our customers have consumed on a steady state basis and what we've provisioned for which is hopefully always a positive difference, we never want to run out, is going to be available on the spot market.
So if you got this application running under Beanstalk, is it the intent when you edit the configuration, you start to do things like use spot market instances, change it to start using that, and kind of modify it to, is this kind of a bootstrapping to get you up? Into
no, you can actually use this for the long term. The idea is you can fully run your application for the long term under this. If you really want, you can unmanage it from here and start fully taking control of it yourself. But the idea is people should be able to run things and keep them under here for.
Is the pricing? Pricing is just basically however many EC2 instances it needs underneath?
That's right.
You pay for.
You don't have to pay anything for Beanstalk. You're just paying for the resources you consume.
Is your Python multi-threaded? Do you know?
That's a great question. I don't actually know. It's Python running on Linux, so I would assume so.
Well, it depends on the version and stuff, which weren't.
Now this is different than Google App Engine in the sense with Google App Engine, your Python's running on the same instance with a whole bunch of other people's code, right? And they've given you this somewhat constrained Python environment because of the limits of that.
They give you instances. I mean, you get cores, virtual cores.
Okay. But I thought they had to actually constrain that because of there were limits on the kinds of Python you can run in that environment.
There are limits, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Ours is not like that because you're actually launching regular Python on a regular instance. And so any package and any app that you want to run, you've got full control of the ability to do that. So
I mean, you pay in the startup cost to some degree, right? That's one of their dials, is they have fixed different
right, all the
types
instances are the same, so that you don't have to worry about getting them set up.
Yeah, it's like 2 seconds or something to provision.
Yeah.
Regardless.
But that means that they also have the ability to fully shut down the app, right? There's times with Google App Engine where I don't think there's any instance behind your app.
Yeah. You can tell it.
Yes, you can scale all the way down to 0. And I don't think we actually accommodate that case.
I was thinking more on the, so I have various things that I want to do which I could use hundreds or thousands of instances for, and was kind of trying to figure out the pricing model, whether it would make sense. Because I've actually been looking, as my new company is scaling more, at things that I might be able to farm out to Amazon where it would make sense. And
most likely spot instances. And the spot instance model is so different that people look at it at first and they often say, my app can't possibly fit into the spot model. But then we're happy to sit down and actually whiteboard with you and get our solution to help you and say, okay, here's ways to think about it that you might not have thought about it before. And people run web servers on the spot market, which is...
I'm less worried about the compute cost. As long as it's in hours, like the minimum commitment, and I'm less worried about the compute cost.
Okay.
I'm happy to just pay for that. It's the availability and the provisioning of the data and transfer.
Sure.
That concerns me more.
Go ahead.
Can EC2 customer also be a seller on the spot market or not?
No. Can you be a seller? No, there wouldn't be, because if you're...
Why not? If I have a bunch of reserved instances and they're available for whatever reason, but even I want instant access.
We just don't have that case enabled yet. So we're actually trying to... There's several different business models that we can see ourselves getting into, but we don't want to get it so complicated that there's 10 different ways to actually get access to compute power. There's definitely this situation where there's so many different choices that people look and say, it's too confusing, I don't want to actually do that.
Do you contractually prevent your customers from reselling the service?
I don't believe we do, no. But there's authentication issues you'd need to solve. If you want to buy an instance and then somehow let other people on it, we don't know that that's happening, but you need to figure out how you're going to actually grant them that access and then revoke it when you don't want them to use it anymore. But if you want to take the largest instances and somehow virtually subdivide them, go right ahead.
Well, that would actually be an easier model for somebody who needs to reserve a large number of instances but wants to get some offset to the cost, right?
Sure.
Yeah, that's why I was asking about the spot market earlier, was in terms of selling, is if I provision 100 machines because I need them sometimes and I want to get the yearly rate, can I basically resell them myself? And it sounds like actually it might be Amazon reselling them, not me, if they're idle.
Now, with reserved instances, there's actually 3 flavors of reserved instances based on what proportion of the year you want them. There's low, medium, and high utilization reserved instances that are, if you think you need something that's like up to X% of the year, you can actually get a low utilization. And there's prices for low, medium, and high as well. So pricing itself, you need to spend some time studying and understanding to make sure you're getting the best value.
You click on the auto scaling?
Of course.
No, on the database tab.
Change the name of the container. No, wait.
So basically with these tabs, we go in a little bit underneath the hood in our Beanstalk application, and we get to control all the parameters. So this is using the regular AWS auto-scaling facilities, and we can say, I want, how many instances do I want running? And as a minimum, anywhere between 1 and 10,000, maximum 1 in 10,000. Which zones I'd like to run in. And then I've got more interesting things, like basically, how do I know when to scale up and when to scale down?
Cooldown time is 1 in 10,000. That's funny.
Which was that?
The scale up cooldown is 0 to 10,000 seconds.
I guess so. So with scaling, you can choose what metric that your application exports to CloudWatch do you actually want to use as your trigger to scale up and scale down. So we found that network out is actually a really good default trigger because there's generally some network limitation of how much data you can pump out of an instance, based on its size. So let's say we trigger a network out, and we want to say based on the average that we see, if the
relatively, yeah. Request is concurrent requests on that top one, the trigger measurement.
The request count is actually a cumulative number of requests. Oh, actually, you know what? Request count, and you would use. Yeah, I don't think that's concurrent. I'm pretty sure it isn't actually. So for network out, what we're going to say is we're going to measure every 5 minutes. We're going to look at 5-minute intervals. If in 5 minutes we see more than this much data transferred out, we'd like to add 1 to the number of instances that we're running. Okay? And we actually need to see that we're in breach, meaning that our number is above that for 5 minutes. Now, we chose these defaults so that for the most part, you don't have to worry about these at all. It's only if you see that it's not exactly meeting your needs, you can go in and tune this, but I'll bet 90% of our customers never hit any of these tabs. So on the lower side, we're saying if the network out is smaller than this number, we'd like to reduce the number of instances by 1. So that's your auto-scaling control. On the load balancing side, a couple different important parameters. Most important thing load balancing does, it's going to hit this URL within your application at the health check interval. So every 30 seconds, it's going to ping your application and say, does it get a successful response from that URL? It's going to give it 5 minutes, or 5 seconds, I'm sorry, to time out. And as long as 3 of them in a row succeed, it's going to consider that instance to be healthy. However, if 5 of them in a row fail, it's considered that instance unhealthy. It's going to take it out of the load balancer rotation. So that's the basic level of control that you need to have over load balancing. Other things you can control, what type of server you want to run. And so basically this is your first chance of scaling. So this is your vertical scaling. What's your unit of machine that you run? Anywhere from a micro up to the 4x large. Security groups, key pairs if you want to shell into your instance, and so forth.
So Jeff, hold on a sec. So auto-scaling allows you to add another instance, but it does not allow you to move from a small instance to a large instance.
No, that's something that we've had a fair number of requests for, and I wouldn't be surprised if we did that at some point. That basically said, to scale up, replace my micro with a small or a medium or a large.
It's interesting though, because I more than doubled my compute capacity on Google, for instance, and it made like 10% difference.
Oh no, we noticed a big difference. So we will
well, it depends on if you're compute bound. It makes a huge difference. If you're all network bound,
we're running our trials in the cloud, and performance was horrible until we switched to a different instance.
But you can just, in this case, you just change it and set it, and they'll all be that new instance, right? Or at least the new ones.
The new ones will be. Yeah, I don't think this resets the existing ones, but this would affect the new ones.
Just do a quick time check. We got it's 5 to 4.
Okay.
Jeff, are you doing okay? You have a few minutes?
Yeah, I'd like to wrap up. I've actually got to go. I've got to put some blog posts online. Oh, one more.
I'm really curious about the database type. Sorry.
Okay.
I thought you were just being a punk.
Yeah, so we've added some new features in here that are not reflected in the configuration yet, but you can actually, when you create a new app, you can also say that you'd like it to create an RDS database instance for you at launch time. So part of your configuration can say, I also want a database to be created automatically for my environment. And you can control container parameters. So you can say how much memory does my runtime get, where do my log files go, what environment variables would I like to pass in, and so forth.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a lot better than what you had before.
Yeah, there's a lot of control in here. Cool. Lots and lots of control. Okay, I think we've covered a ton, and I've only like scratched the surface of all the stuff that we have to offer. Please do feel free to track me down if you have more questions or dig stuff up on the website.
We won't wait another 3 years.
Okay, yeah.
All right.
So the pace of innovation has just been kind of insane. I actually write all the blog posts for our launches, and at some point I'm going to actually just get kind of maximum level of concurrency and just won't be able to like deal with all the different things that are coming out. But so far,
You have your annual conference?
our annual conference is coming up in Las Vegas in November. This is actually our first one. It will be annual, but this is the first one, and we're expecting, I think, 5,000 people, so this should be a pretty big deal.
Now those solution experts that you're
Keep going to Vegas
talking about, that you kept referencing,
Yeah.
who would they work with and for what?
So basically, you would generally engage our solution architects through one of our business development folks. And when you get to a certain size, usually someone from AWS will start working with you just to make sure that they have a human contact at your company. If you've never talked to anybody, you can generally go to the website and say, I want to talk to a person, and we'll find a way to get someone to talk to you. And then our solution architects, often they were basically hired out of our community in the sense that the solution architects often worked for companies using AWS, and then they said, you know what, I'm now such an expert at this, I actually want to go help other people to make good use of it. But these are folks that are extremely experienced systems architects that can look at your architecture and say, okay, here's how to take what you have and here's how to map it over to AWS.
Can I get a copy of your presentation?
Sure, I'll send an email.
So you're willing to field a kind of a big picture question?
I'll try.
Yeah, I'm interested in your perspective. You have had half a decade now to look back on this, right?
Yeah.
So the overall idea technically in a business is not a new idea, been around for decades. There were many players around a decade or more ago trying to do it, like Sun's Utility Computing and IBM's Autonomic Computing and so forth. And a dozen years ago, nobody would have predicted that the world's biggest bookstore would be the one to get this right.
Yeah.
Right? So why is it?
Why?
Why is it that Amazon has been so enormously successful in doing this, and everyone else fell on their sword or?
Well, yeah, in one sense, I think it turned out to be a lot harder than anybody thought to do, not just the technical side, but the business side of this. Charging a customer for stuff is actually a really, really hard problem. Like, everybody just assumes that you can just like put a business together and, oh yeah, people will pay for it somehow. But actually tabulating how much of something that people use and getting a bill and sending a bill and dealing with credit card processing and dealing with, did the charge actually go through, did it not go through? How do we know that these are good customers? How do we know that people aren't trying to defraud us in some way? That stuff is actually really, really difficult. And it's stuff that we built at the very, very beginning of Amazon that we still continue to have entire teams working on just getting that payment side right. And then having getting the business side right, actually figuring out a high quality business model for each of these. And as you've seen, we have different pricing models for every service. And I can see as we're building these services, there's a ton of iteration on, we could price it like this, or like this, or like this. And so we understand what our costs are. We then figure out, okay, is this a model that actually makes sense with customers? Do customers think this is a reasonable way to pay for things? I suspect that a lot of those early efforts were valid technically, but they were maybe simplistic on the business side, or they just were built by engineers who said, oh yeah, we'll build this thing, and yeah, $1 an hour, that sounds like a good thing. And with no understanding of how do you actually measure all the hours, there's a gigantic system behind the scenes that I understand is a gigantic MapReduce cluster with hundreds or thousands of machines that simply just does like bill calculation, right? Going through all the records. So every time you launch something, consume something, use some storage, use some bandwidth, we've got to go through all those records and actually turn them into customer bills. And that by itself is apparently a world-class problem. So there's a lot more complexity behind the scenes than I think people really understood. So I think that's part of it. I think API enabling everything was really, really important. Like making it self-service so that any random person can go to the website and can sign up and put their credit card number in, get their authentication, get their secret key, get their public key, use those without having to talk to a salesperson, without having to submit an application and fax something in to prove your identity and to say, I'd like to apply to be a customer of your grid, let's say, to kind of go a generation back. Making that on-ramp super, super easy. And there's a ton of friction points already. Everything that we do, I'm sure there's a way to do it 10 times better, but we're we're devoted to finding and then just sanding off all those rough edges.
How about your competitors, who kind of keeps you awake up at night? Anyone?
Me personally?
Yeah.
I actually don't pay any attention whatsoever to competitors. We have been basically, the direction we get from management is, if you spend 1 hour thinking about competition, spend 10 hours thinking about customers, is the way that we have always run the company. Is, yes, there's always going to be a bunch of competitors doing this and that other thing. Are they customer driven or not? They might be, but we know for sure if we really spend that time, instead of worrying about, what's A, B, or C company doing, it's far better to actually sit down with real customers and say, okay, we've done this so far for you. What else can we do for you? Or how are we meeting your needs? Or how are we not meeting your needs? It's much more productive. There's so many different companies out there trying things that maybe they're engineering driven, maybe they're marketing driven. You can't know. Maybe they're building stuff just to satisfy a checklist. Maybe they're doing stuff just to make their competition think they should be building other stuff. And I mean, you look at what some of these big guys do to each other, and I honestly think, for example, if you look at Google or Microsoft, that they build stuff just to make the other company think that they should also be getting into these businesses. There's this massive distraction element of like, oh, we built one of these. Oh, yeah, we're in this business too. Oh, well, we have this. Okay, we should be doing that too. And I'm not convinced that's a healthy way to do things. So as far as a competitor that makes us, I'm sure somebody in the business actually stays up at night worrying about competition, but for the most part, I really enjoy speaking with customers, and I probably get 5 to 10 emails a day from different customers, either emails or blog comments or tweets that are like a suggestion, a comment, a complaint, an idea. I take those, I pass them along to the team. The team's like, wow, that's pretty awesome, a real customer. We treasure that feedback, and we drop it into our process right away. And it's very different than you look at like what the competition's doing and say, okay, well, let's just build this big feature grid, and you put the names here, and you put all the features here, and what do all those check marks mean? Is it real features, pretend features? Does anybody use those features? Hard to know. So customers is where it's at for us.
Well, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. I'll come back in, 2016 or so?
Some might not be around anymore.
Hey, I'm destined to be the old man of the cloud, I guess, so.
Before we take a break, show of hands for dinner tonight?
Yeah, it's just me.
So I guess
Dave's going to join us.
What?
Dave McLaren's going to join us. So it's 4.
And was Stephen, I can't remember if he said something about dinner.
Oh, yeah, Stephen was interested.
He said he might have been aware, I think.
There you go.
Location preference, guys?
Well, thanks.
Well, do you
There's
want
a
to
ton
go
here, but
to?
I scratched the surface. That's the best I could do.
Basically a pointer for us to read on more stuff, that's valuable.
Get up here on Ralston, Belmont.
There you go.
Or we could go, how about Ordinator and Utica, City?
I'm talked out.
City. Both of these are places we've actually been to before at these events.
One hard thing is that I've looked at,
Your choice. You know the
4 or 5 years ago, there were all these limitations that made it a no decision. And I'm sure some of these, they all have died away, but it's hard to know.
This is such a different environment than the traditional kind of shrink-wrapped and OS release model where there's nothing happens for 3 years, then you get a release, and then nothing happens for 3 years, then you get a release. This is more of a continuous improvement kind of a model. So staying current with it is definitely a little bit more difficult.
And even back then, it was hard when there was one conference with the Amazon booth, and I had some very specific questions, but they, maybe, like hard to find somebody who really knows.
Yeah.
I'll call the name.
Well, each person generally knows their service really well. If you talk to the manager of a particular team, they're going to know their service inside and out. It's only the solution architects and the people like me, the evangelists, that tend to know really across all the services.
Technically.
If you look at an individual service, you look at EC2, the EC2 programming manual is nearly 700 pages long. Okay, so each of these services is a very, very rich product all by itself.
So for your video podcast, what are you trying to do? Are you interviewing different service experts and talking about it?
What I do is I do a couple different things. I bring in the leaders of the different teams, and so I've talked to like the leaders of the Glacier team and the S3 team, working on other teams as well. And I also bring in success stories. So I bring in, yesterday I had, who did I have yesterday? I had like Citrix, and I had Intel, and I had Trend Micro, a couple of our big customers. I've had lots and lots of startups.
5:30?
And learning how to be a talk show host. Turns out to be, it's really hard. It's really, really difficult. Doing like deep technical stuff is really easy compared to actually being a decent talk show host, it turns out. Like actually listening to people and asking good questions and doing it live effectively and recording once and saying, okay, we'll do a little editing, but we're not gonna do multiple takes or anything. It is mentally intense. We actually, yesterday I did 5, which was pretty good. But the week, I did 5 interviews in one day. The week before we were doing some special stuff, I did 10 in one day. It took me almost 2 days to feel like my brain was actually put back together again after 10 shows in one day.
That's a tremendous resource, you have that level of
take a little break then?
resource
Yeah,
for people to look at.
10-minute break, yeah.
It turns out to be really good long-term content also. Like a blog post is mostly popular the day that you put the blog post out, and a little bit of follow-on traffic, but not a whole lot. The videos, even the videos that are 2 or 3 months old, are still getting a nice number of hits per day. So you never know when something new comes along that might be your next new thing to do. Looks like the videos are one of my next 2 things to do. All right, I've got 3 blog posts to put online tonight, so I've got to.
Thanks for your colleague for this. You might have heard back from him.
Oh, you haven't?
I'll ping him again.
He just started a new job that's apparently he is.
Okay.
He just started a new job that's apparently really, really demanding. So.
Which group is he in?
Is
it Amazon or?
No, you're talking about Mike McAvoy?
Yeah.
Oh, Mike is actually, he's in a startup locally called Centerline, I think.
Okay. He's recommending a colleague for our.
He would be great for this group. He would really enjoy it. I
Looking
think
for-
you get some good benefit
I'll
from
ping
it as
him
well.
again. Okay, anyway,
Okay.
thanks for, if you meet other VPs,
Definitely will.
Okay.
Great to meet you again.
Thank you.
All right.
Jeff, may I ask a quick question?
Of course.
So for partners trying to build this solution,
Yeah.
so if we need help from solution architects, so we're going to people like you or?
If you are a partner, you want to join the partner network. So we have something called, okay.